let's begin with a book that doesn't just change your mind, it changes the way you listen to the universe. The Beginning of Infinity by David Deutsch. This isn't a book you read to find answers. It's one you listen to like a quiet symphony of ideas, where each thought builds on the last, not with force, but with grace. At its heart is a radical, comforting idea: progress is infinite. Not because we'll solve every problem tomorrow, but because every problem, no matter how deep, has a solution waiting in the fabric of reality. We just haven't found it yet. Deutsch calls this the reach of knowledge, the idea that there are no fundamental limits to what we can understand. Not in science, not in morality, not in art. Every breakthrough, from fire to the internet, began as a guess, a conjecture, refined by criticism, tested by time. And knowledge doesn't just grow, it evolves. Like living things, weak explanations die out, and stronger ones take their place. This isn't about memorizing facts. It's about staying open, curious, willing to be wrong. One of the most peaceful ideas in the book is that we are not passive observers of the universe. We are participants. Our questions, our experiments, our dreams, they shape the future. Even now, as you lie here, your mind is part of this unfolding story. So if you've ever felt small, or like your thoughts don't matter, this book offers a quiet truth. You are part of an endless expansion of understanding, not because you have all the answers, but because you're still asking questions. And that's enough. Deutsch also reminds us that this progress isn't automatic. It depends on open societies, places where ideas can be shared, challenged, refined. Where curiosity is protected, not punished. So when you feel overwhelmed by noise, by misinformation, by fear, remember, light spreads faster when we keep the doors open. This book won't make you smarter in the way exams measure, but it will make you freer, free from the fear of not knowing, free from the weight of final answers, free to wonder, without urgency. Let that sense of infinite possibility rest in your mind, like stars stretching beyond sight. And now, let's drift into the next voice. Now, a book that feels like floating in deep space, not with fear, but with wonder. The Theory of Everything by Stephen Hawking. This isn't a book that overwhelms with equations or demands your full attention. Instead, it invites you into a quiet contemplation of how the universe began, how it moves, and whether there's a single thread that ties all of reality together. Hawking takes us back to the beginning, the Big Bang, not as a violent explosion, but as a delicate unfolding. A moment when time, space, and matter emerged from a point so small, so dense, that our current laws of physics can't fully describe it. And yet, from that singularity, galaxies formed, stars ignited, planets cooled, and life, against all odds, began to dream. One of the most peaceful ideas in this book is that the universe isn't random. It follows patterns, gravity, quantum mechanics, relativity, laws that allow for structure, for beauty, for stars to shine in rhythm. But here's the mystery: these laws don't always agree. Einstein's theory of relativity explains the vast cosmos, the dance of planets and black holes. Quantum mechanics governs the tiniest particles, flickering in and out of existence. And yet, the two don't quite fit together. The theory of everything would be the bridge, a single framework that unifies all forces, all scales, all of existence. Hawking doesn't claim to have found it. He simply honors the search. And that's what makes this book so calming. It doesn't promise final answers. It celebrates the mystery. He writes about black holes not just as cosmic vacuums, but as paradoxes, places where time slows, where information might vanish, where our understanding breaks down. And yet, even in that breakdown, there is beauty. Because every unanswered question is an invitation to wonder. Hawking also explores the nature of time, suggesting it might not be as linear as we feel. In the early universe, time may have had no clear direction. And in extreme conditions, it might loop, bend, or even stop. But here, now, as you listen, time moves gently forward, like breath. And that's enough. One of the most touching moments in the book comes when Hawking reflects on our place in the cosmos. Are we insignificant? Just specks in an endless void? He suggests the opposite. Because we can observe, question, and understand, we are part of the universe becoming aware of itself. So if you've ever looked up at the night sky and felt small, this book whispers, you belong here. Your curiosity is not noise. It's a signal, a sign that consciousness is alive, and still exploring. Let that thought linger. Like starlight traveling across eons to reach your eyes. And now, let's drift into the next voice. Next, a book that doesn't just explain the universe, it sings to it. Cosmos by Carl Sagan. This isn't a textbook. It's a love letter, written not to a person, but to existence itself. To the stars, the atoms, the fragile blue dot we call home. Sagan doesn't speak like a scientist delivering facts. He speaks like a poet who's spent his life gazing upward, not to conquer the sky, but to commune with it. And one sentence stays with you long after you've closed the book. We are made of star stuff. Think about that. The calcium in your bones, the iron in your blood, every atom in your body was forged in the heart of a star that exploded billions of years ago. You are not separate from the cosmos. You are one of its ways of knowing itself. Sagan walks us through the story of the universe, from the first flicker of light to the rise of life on Earth, not with urgency, but with reverence. He pauses on small moments. A dandelion seed drifting on the wind. A child asking, why is the sky blue? A single frame of the pale blue dot photo, Earth, a tiny speck in the vast dark. And in each, he sees the whole. Not with sadness, but with awe. He reminds us that every culture has looked up and told stories, of gods, heroes, constellations. Today, we tell stories with science. But the impulse is the same. We want to belong to something greater. One of the most common ideas in Cosmos is that the universe is comprehensible. Not completely. Not perfectly. But enough for us to begin to understand. That we, made of stardust and water and fragile minds, can decode the laws of gravity, the age of stars, the rhythm of galaxies. That is miraculous. And yet, Sagan never lets science become cold. He insists on wonder. On humility. On the courage to admit, we don't know. So if you've ever felt disconnected, from nature, from meaning, from yourself, this book says, you are woven into the fabric of everything. Your breath contains ancient air. Your thoughts echo the complexity of the cosmos. And your presence, quiet, fleeting, real, matters. Not because you'll be remembered, but because you're here. Let that sense of belonging settle into your bones. Like sunlight warming your skin on a quiet afternoon. And now, let's continue, gently, into the next voice. There's a quiet kind of magic in the way reality holds itself together, not with force, but with logic, pattern, and possibility. And in the fabric of reality, David Deutsch invites us to see that magic not as mystery, but as a tapestry, woven from threads we're only beginning to understand. He doesn't try to explain everything at once. Instead, he brings together four great strands of human understanding: quantum physics, computation, evolution, and knowledge. And he suggests, if we follow them long enough, they may all lead to the same place. One of the most soothing ideas in this book is that the universe isn't random, it's comprehensible. Not because we've figured it all out, but because the laws of nature allow for understanding to grow. Like a puzzle with infinite pieces, we'll never finish it, but we can always add one more. Deutsch reimagines knowledge not as a library, but as a living thing. It evolves. Ideas compete. Weak explanations fade. Stronger ones survive, not by force, but by their ability to withstand criticism. This means you don't have to be afraid of being wrong. Being wrong is how we get closer to what's true. And that's not a flaw in the system, it's the system. He also explores the idea of parallel universes, not as science fiction, but as a serious interpretation of quantum mechanics. In this view, every decision, every quantum event, branches into multiple realities. But rather than making us feel scattered, Deutsch suggests it deepens our sense of possibility. You didn't fail, another version of you succeeded. And in this life, you're still learning. What makes this book so gentle is its quiet optimism. Problems are inevitable, but solvable. Ignorance is temporary. Progress isn't guaranteed, but it's possible, as long as we keep asking questions. So if you've ever felt stuck, or overwhelmed by how much you don't know, this book offers a soft truth. You don't need to have answers. You just need to stay curious. That's how reality unfolds, one question at a time. Let that sense of openness grow in your mind. Like a window slowly opening to fresh air. And as we leave this world of ideas, let the next one rise like morning light. Time doesn't flow the way you think it does. In fact, at the deepest level, it may not flow at all. That's the quiet revelation at the heart of The Order of Time by Carlo Rovelli, a book that dissolves minutes like sugar in warm tea. He begins by dismantling what we take for granted. Past, present, future, they aren't fixed. Clocks tick at different speeds. Gravity bends time. And at the quantum level, there's no now that everyone shares. But this isn't meant to unsettle. It's meant to free. If time isn't rigid, then the present, this breath, this moment, becomes more real, not less. Because it's not just a point on a line. It's where you truly live. Rovelli writes like a physicist who also meditates. His words don't argue, they unfold. He tells us that time emerges from our limited perspective, from heat, from memory, from the way we experience change. Without us, time as we know it wouldn't exist. And that's not lonely. It's intimate. Think of a cup of coffee cooling. We say it's moving forward in time, but that's only because we remember it hot, and now it's cold. The universe doesn't care. Only we do. So if you've ever worried about running out of time, or not doing enough, this book whispers. You're already in the only moment that belongs to you. The past is memory. The future is guesswork. But now, this stillness is real. Rovelli ends not with equations, but with poetry. He speaks of love, of connection, of how we create islands of order in a universe of change. Not by stopping time, but by embracing its flow. Let that sense of presence soften your thoughts. Like ripples fading on a pond. And as we drift from this stillness, let the next idea rise like mist from quiet ground. Have you ever looked at a snowflake and felt like it was speaking a language just beyond your reach? That quiet sense of hidden order is at the heart of Our Mathematical Universe by Max Tegmark, a book that suggests reality isn't just described by math. It is math. Not cold equations on a chalkboard, but patterns so deep they shape galaxies, life, and even consciousness. The spiral of a seashell. The rhythm of seasons. The symmetry of a flower. These aren't accidents. They're expressions of a structure woven into the fabric of existence. Tegmark doesn't say this to make the world feel mechanical. He says it to make it feel coherent. Beneath the chaos, there's harmony. Not imposed, inherent. He takes us through 4 levels of multiverse, each more expansive than the last, where every possible universe exists, governed by different mathematical laws. In one, gravity is stronger. In another, time flows backward. In another, You made the choice you almost made. And yet, rather than making us feel lost in infinity, this idea can be deeply comforting. If every possibility is real somewhere, then nothing is truly wasted. Every dream, every path not taken, lives in its own quiet corner of reality. But here's the most peaceful part. You don't need to understand the math to feel its beauty. You already do, every time you're moved by music, touched by symmetry, or calmed by a repeating rhythm. That's mathematics as emotion. As art. As soul. So if you've ever felt adrift in a random universe, this book offers a quiet reassurance. There is structure. There is pattern. And you, with your ability to wonder at it, are part of that pattern. Let that sense of belonging to a deeper order settle into your breath. Like a heartbeat syncing with a distant drum. And as we release this vision of cosmic harmony, let the next idea rise like a whisper from the edge of sleep. Some people chase answers like treasure. Richard Feynman didn't. He loved the search. And in the pleasure of finding things out, he invites us to slow down, get curious, and fall in love with not knowing. This isn't a book of grand theories. It's a collection of moments, Feynman watching ants on a sidewalk, picking locks for fun, teaching his sister the stars, where wonder isn't forced, but found. He says the most exciting phrase in science isn't eureka. It's, that's funny. The moment something doesn't make sense, that's where discovery begins. And that's what makes this book so soothing. It doesn't demand brilliance. It celebrates curiosity. The kind that makes you tilt your head at a puddle, or wonder why milk swirls the way it does in tea. Feynman wasn't interested in impressing people. He was interested in seeing clearly. In admitting when he didn't know. In laughing at himself when he got it wrong. So if you've ever felt pressure to understand, to achieve, to fix, this book is a release. You don't have to know. You just have to be open. To let the world surprise you. He also speaks about the beauty of uncertainty. Not as failure, but as freedom. If we knew everything, he says, life would be like reading a novel you've already finished. The joy is in the unfolding. And that applies not just to science, but to living. You don't need to have your whole life figured out. You just need to stay interested. To keep turning pages. One of the most touching parts is when he describes watching the atomic bomb test, a moment of awe and horror. And instead of boasting, he tells us he was the only one laughing, because he was watching the sky change colors like a child. Even in darkness, wonder remained. So if your mind feels heavy with responsibility, this voice says, lighten up. Look at the world like it's new. Because in a way, it is, every time you truly see it. Let that childlike curiosity soften your thoughts. Like sunlight warming an old wooden floor. And as we step away from this joyful mind, let the next presence settle around you like a favorite coat on a cool evening. What if meaning isn't something you find, but something you make? That's The Quiet Heart of the Big Picture by Carroll, a book that looks at the universe in all its vast, impersonal beauty, and still finds room for love. He begins with the cold truth. There's no cosmic plan. No divine script. The universe doesn't care if you're happy. But instead of despair, Carroll offers liberation. If meaning isn't handed down, then it's ours to create. In kindness. In connection. In the simple act of being here, aware, alive. He calls this poetic naturalism, a way of seeing the world as it is, without illusions, yet still finding wonder. You are made of particles. Yes. But you are also a story. A mind. A person who laughs, grieves, dreams. And that story matters, not to the stars, but to you. One of the most peaceful ideas in the book is that consciousness isn't magic. It's a natural process, emergent, fragile, real. And because it's rare, it's precious. Every moment of awareness is a miracle of arrangement. So if you've ever worried that life has no purpose in a godless universe, this book says, purpose isn't found. It's felt. It lives in the way you hold someone's hand, write a letter, watch the rain. Carroll doesn't dismiss spirituality. He redefines it, as awe, as gratitude, as the courage to face reality without flinching. And that's what makes this book so calming. It doesn't ask you to believe. It asks you to be. To accept the universe as it is, and still choose to care. Let that sense of grounded meaning settle into your chest. Like a stone warmed by long hours in the sun. And as we leave this spacious view of existence, let the next voice come not like a thought, but like a breath returning after silence. Time moves forward. Eggs break but don't unbreak. Memories are of the past, never the future. Why? That's the quiet mystery at the heart of From Eternity to Here, a book that traces the arrow of time not to clocks, but to entropy. Carroll explains that the reason time flows one way is because the universe began in a state of incredibly low entropy, highly ordered. Since then, it's been unfolding into greater disorder. That's why stars burn out, why people age, why coffee cools. Not because of fate, but because there are more ways to be disordered than ordered. But here's the comfort in that. Change isn't tragedy. It's the rhythm of reality. Without it, nothing would happen. No growth. No love. No stories. He doesn't speak coldly about entropy. He speaks of it like a tide, natural, inevitable, even beautiful. The universe isn't decaying. It's becoming. And in that becoming, we appear, not as mistakes, but as expressions of that flow. Our thoughts, our feelings, our lives, they're all patterns in the unfolding. So if you've ever feared decay, loss, or aging, this book offers a gentle truth. Everything that ends made space for what came before. And what you are now, this awareness, this breath, is part of that sacred flow. Carroll also reminds us that the past is special not because it happened, but because it left traces, memories, fossils, light traveling across space. The future has no traces. Which is why we remember one, but not the other. That doesn't make the future less real. It makes the present more precious. Let that acceptance of impermanence soften into peace. Like sand slowly filling the grooves of a seashell. And as we release this vision of time's quiet journey, let the next presence arrive not with sound, but like the first hint of dawn behind closed eyes. Close your eyes and imagine, not just one version of you, but infinite versions. In some, you took that job. In others, you stayed in love. In others, you never existed at all. That's the quiet wonder of the hidden reality by Greene, a journey through the idea of the multiverse. He walks us through 9 different versions of parallel worlds, from quantum branches to distant bubble universes, not to overwhelm, but to expand. And the most peaceful takeaway isn't the science, it's the relief. If every possibility exists, then nothing is truly lost. The life you didn't choose? It's lived, just not by you. That doesn't make this life less important. It makes it more sacred. Because this is the one you're in. With this breath. This heartbeat. This moment of listening. Greene doesn't claim to prove the multiverse. He presents it as a possibility, emerging from our best theories of physics. And in doing so, he doesn't make us feel small. He makes us feel connected to the vastness of what could be. So if you've ever carried regret, or wondered what if, this book says, let go. That version of you is living their truth. And you? You're here. Alive. Aware. Making choices in real time. And that's extraordinary. One of the most calming moments comes when Greene describes how, in some interpretations, the universe splits with every quantum event, silently, endlessly. Not with a bang, but with a breath. And in each branch, a version of reality continues, unaware of the others. It's not science fiction. It's a quiet expansion of what's possible. Let that sense of infinite potential soften into stillness, like ripples spreading across a lake under a full moon. And as we drift from this vision of endless worlds, let the next voice come not as a thought, but as a warmth behind your eyes, like the first sign of sleep. Imagine a world where you don't see light, but hear silence turn into shape. Where a single cry into the dark tells you the curve of a leaf, the flutter of a wing, the path ahead. That's the world of the bat, and in one of the most quietly revolutionary essays in philosophy, Thomas Nagel asks, can we ever truly know what it's like to be one? He doesn't answer with science. He answers with a boundary. No matter how many brain scans we take, how much we study echolocation, how perfectly we map the neurons, we will never feel what it's like to be a bat. Because experience isn't just data. It's what it feels like from the inside. In that inner world, what philosophers call qualia is private. Not hidden. Just personal. This isn't a failure of science. It's a revelation. Consciousness can't be fully objectified. There's always a gap between the observer and the observed, and in that gap, the soul lives. So if you've ever felt misunderstood, or wondered if anyone truly sees you, this idea brings a strange comfort. Every mind is an island. Not isolated. Not lonely. Just deeply, beautifully irreducible. Nagel isn't saying we can't empathize. We can. But empathy is translation, not possession. You can imagine another's pain, but you don't have it. And that's okay. In fact, it's sacred. Your inner world, your joy, your grief, your quiet moments of awe, belongs to you in a way no one else can touch. And that makes it real. So if you've ever doubted your own experience, this essay says, trust it. You don't need proof to know you're alive. You feel it. And that feeling is enough. Let that sense of inner truth settle into your chest. Like a secret you carry with peace, not fear. And as we leave this quiet island of awareness, let the next voice rise like mist from a forest floor, soft, slow, and full of unseen life. There's a story running inside your head, a narrator who says I. But what if that I isn't a person, but a character in a story the brain tells itself? That's the gentle unraveling at the heart of consciousness explained by Dennett, not a destruction of the self, but a reimagining. He doesn't believe in a little man sitting in your skull, watching a screen of thoughts. Instead, he sees consciousness as a collage, memories, sensations, guesses, stitched together after the fact. The brain doesn't present reality in real time. It reconstructs it. With gaps. With edits. With best guesses. And yet, you feel seamless. Whole. Real. That's the miracle. Even though there's no central you, the story holds. You wake up. You drink tea. You love someone. You wonder at the stars. And it all feels like you are doing it. So if you've ever worried you're not real or in control, this book offers a soft truth. You don't need a ghost in the machine to be you. You are the story. And the story is enough. Dennett doesn't make consciousness boring. He makes it human. Flawed. Adaptive. Beautiful in its imperfection. One of the most calming ideas is that you don't have to be aware of everything for it to matter. Your body breathes without your permission. Your heart beats without your command. And yet, they are part of you. Consciousness isn't the boss, it's one part of a vast, quiet system. So if your mind feels noisy, or you're exhausted from trying to be present, this book says, let go. You don't have to monitor everything. Life is happening, with or without your full attention. Let that release soften into your bones. Like a hand unclenching after holding on too long. And as we step away from this story of the self, let the next presence arrive not as a thought, but as a warmth spreading behind your eyelids, slow, deep, and wordless. You're reading these words. You feel your body. You remember your name. But how does any of that feel like anything at all? That's the quiet thunder at the center of The Mystery of Consciousness by John Searle, a book that doesn't try to dissolve the mind, but to honor its depth. He agrees with science, the brain produces consciousness. But he refuses to reduce it to mere computation. The taste of chocolate, the ache of longing, the color red, these aren't just data. They're experienced. And that experience, that what it's likeness, can't be captured in equations. Searle doesn't pretend to solve the mystery. He insists on it. And in doing so, he gives us permission to not know. So if you've ever felt pressure to figure yourself out, this book whispers, you don't have to. You can be real without being fully understood, even by yourself. He also challenges the idea that machines could ever be truly conscious, not because they're too simple, but because consciousness isn't just about processing. It's about biology. About being a living organism that feels hunger, fear, warmth. A computer can simulate pain, but it doesn't suffer. And that distinction matters. It means your feelings aren't just algorithms. They're part of a living, breathing history, evolved over billions of years. So if you've ever felt like you're just a machine, or that love is just chemicals, this book says, no. Chemistry is the medium, but the meaning is real. The joy is real. The grief is real. Let that validation of your inner world settle into your breath. Like a long exhale after holding it through the day. And as we drift from this mystery, let the next voice come not as an answer, but as a quiet hum in the walls, unnoticed, always there, and deeply familiar. This book was never meant for you. It was written in the dark hours before battle, by a man trying to stay kind in a world of power and pain. Meditations by Marcus Aurelius, a Roman emperor, a philosopher, a human being, speaking to himself in the quiet. And what does he say? Not conquer more. Not fear less. But focus on what you can control. Let go of what you can't. Your reputation? Not yours. The weather? Not yours. Other people's opinions? Not yours. What is yours? Your attention. Your choices. Your attitude, even in suffering. That's the core of Stoicism. You can't stop the storm, but you can choose how you stand in it. So if you've ever felt overwhelmed by life's demands, this voice says, step back. Ask, is this mine to carry? If not, gently, without guilt, set it down. Aurelius doesn't preach perfection. He admits his own struggles. His distractions. His moments of anger. And that's what makes it real. This isn't a lecture from a flawless sage. It's a journal from someone trying, every day, to be better. One of the most calming lines. You could leave life right now. Let that determine what you do and say and think. Not to scare, but to clarify. What matters fades into focus when you stop pretending you have forever. Let that gentle urgency soften into peace. Like a candle burning down to its final glow. And as we close this private journal, let the next presence arrive not as a voice, but as a stillness between heartbeats, brief, deep, and full of presence. Imagine your mind as a room. Thoughts come in, worries, memories, plans, like visitors knocking at the door. Most of us open the door, invite them in, serve them tea, and let them stay for years. But what if you didn't have to? That's the quiet liberation at the heart of The Untethered Soul by Michael A. Singer. He asks, who are you when you stop identifying with your thoughts? Not the voice that says I'm not enough, but the one hearing it. That awareness, that silent witness, is the real you. And it's always free. Singer doesn't demand you stop thinking. He just asks you to stop believing every thought. Let them come. Let them go. Like clouds across the sky. So if your mind feels noisy, crowded, exhausting, this book says, you are not your thoughts. You are the space they float through. And that space, vast, quiet, unshaken, is always there. He also speaks of energy, how emotions aren't just feelings, but blockages in the flow of life. When you resist pain, fear, or change, you tighten. And that tightening becomes a wall. But if you allow, without judgment, without reaction, the energy moves. Pain passes. Fear fades. Joy returns. So if you've ever felt stuck in a loop of anxiety or regret, this book offers a simple path. Don't fight. Don't fix. Just let. One of the most peaceful moments comes when he describes the inner roommate, that constant chatter, and says, you don't have to live with it. You can close the door. Walk away. Return to the silence beneath. Let that sense of spacious freedom grow in your chest. Like a room finally open to fresh air after years of stillness. And as we release this vision of inner peace, let the next voice arrive not as a word, but as a softening at the back of your skull, like the first sign of deep relaxation. There's a moment, just after you stop thinking about the past. And before you start worrying about the future. When everything goes quiet. No labels. No stories. Just presence. That's the doorway Eckhart Tolle opens in The Power of Now, not with force, but with a whisper. He doesn't ask you to change your life. He asks you to stop. To pause, even for a breath, and notice. You are here. You are alive. You are not your thoughts. You are the awareness behind them. And in that stillness, something softens. The mind quiets. The body relaxes. The heart opens. Tolle calls the ego the pain body, a collection of old wounds, fears, and identities that feed on drama and resistance. But you don't have to feed it. You can withdraw your attention. And when you do, it fades, not with struggle, but with disinterest. So if you've ever felt trapped in anxiety, regret, or self-judgment, this book says, step out of time. Not forward. Not backward. But down, into the now. He doesn't promise enlightenment. He points to the door. Your breath. The feel of your hands. The hum of the room. These are not distractions from the now. They are its language. One of the most peaceful ideas is that suffering is optional. Pain may come, physical, emotional, but the resistance to it is what causes agony. When you stop fighting what is, peace appears, not as a feeling, but as a space. So if life feels heavy, this voice says, let go of the story. Feel your feet on the floor. Listen to the silence between sounds. Be the awareness that doesn't need to fix anything. Let that sense of deep presence settle into your bones. Like roots sinking into warm earth after a long drought. And as we leave this moment of stillness, let the next voice arrive not as a thought, but as a slight widening behind your eyes, like the first softening before sleep. Most of the time, we're asleep, not in body, but in mind. Rushing through routines, repeating words, living on autopilot. That's the quiet diagnosis at the heart of being in time by Martin Heidegger. A dense, profound work that, at its core, simply asks, what does it mean to truly be? Not to achieve. Not to become. But to exist, fully, deeply, without distraction. He calls this authentic being. And it doesn't come from effort. It comes from moments of awakening. A sudden memory. A sunset that stops you. The silence after someone says, "I love you." In those seconds, the veil lifts. You feel your existence. Not as a role, a title, a function, but as a living, breathing presence in the world. Heidegger doesn't offer a path to happiness. He offers something deeper. Awareness of finitude. The knowledge that you will die, and because of that, your time is real. Not infinite. Not replaceable. But yours. So if you've ever felt like life is passing you by, this book says, wake up. Not with panic, but with tenderness. Look at your hands. Feel your breath. Remember your name. He also speaks of being toward death, not as fear, but as clarity. When you stop denying the end, you stop wasting the middle. You begin to live not for the future, but for the now. One of the most calming ideas is that you don't need to do anything extraordinary to be authentic. You just need to be where you are. In the shower. On the bus. Lying here, listening. That's enough. Let that permission to simply exist settle into your chest. Like a sigh that's been waiting all day to be released. And as we step out of this philosophical space, let the next presence arrive not as a concept, but as a warmth spreading through your palms, slow, quiet, and deeply grounding. Why is there something rather than nothing? Why do the laws of physics exist at all? And why are they so perfectly tuned to allow for stars, planets, and life? These aren't religious questions in the mind of God by Paul Davies. They're scientific wonders, asked with reverence, not dogma. He doesn't claim to know if God exists. But he wonders. Could the universe have a purpose? Not a plan, not a deity, but a direction? Toward complexity. Toward consciousness. Toward understanding itself? And that idea, that the cosmos might be unfolding toward awareness, isn't frightening. It's comforting. Because if the universe allows for questions, then curiosity isn't random. It's part of the design. Davies walks us through the elegance of physical laws. How gravity shapes galaxies. How quantum mechanics allows for chemistry. How simple rules give rise to infinite variety. And he asks, is this all accident? Or is there a deep logic, a kind of mind, implicit in reality? So if you've ever looked at the stars and felt a quiet awe, this book says, that feeling is valid. Wonder isn't weakness. It's wisdom. He doesn't demand belief. He invites contemplation. Like standing at the edge of the ocean, not to conquer it, but to feel its depth. One of the most peaceful moments comes when he describes how mathematics, a human invention, perfectly describes the universe. Why should our minds resonate with the structure of reality? Unless we're part of the same story. So if you've ever felt separate from the cosmos, this book whispers, you are its way of thinking. Your questions are not noise. They are signals, echoes of the universe waking up to itself. Let that sense of sacred connection grow in your awareness. Like moonlight slowly filling a dark room. And as we drift from this cosmic wonder, let the next voice arrive not as an idea, but as a softening at the base of your skull, like the first release of tension after a long day. Imagine the universe not as a machine of separate parts, but as a dance. A web of relationships, constantly moving, constantly becoming. That's the heart of the Tao of Physics by Fritjof Capra. A book that finds surprising harmony between modern physics and Eastern mysticism. He shows how quantum physics, with its entangled particles, its wave-particle duality, doesn't describe solid objects, but patterns of energy. Things aren't things, they're events. Interactions. Moments in a flow. And that's exactly what Eastern traditions have said for centuries. All is change. All is connection. The self is not a fixed entity, but a process. So if you've ever felt alone, or separate from the world, this book says, you are not a drop in the ocean. You are the ocean, in motion. Capra doesn't force a match between science and spirituality. He simply observes. When physicists look deeply into matter, they find emptiness, interdependence, and mystery. When mystics look deeply into consciousness, they find the same. And that convergence isn't coincidence, it's insight. One of the most common ideas is that separation is an illusion. When two particles are entangled, they respond to each other instantly. Even across galaxies. Einstein called it spooky action at a distance. But Capra sees it as proof. Reality is not fragmented. It is whole. So if you've ever felt broken or fragmented, this book whispers, you are part of a single movement. Your breath is connected to the wind. Your heartbeat to the rhythm of stars. Let that sense of unity settle into your body. Like a single note sustained in a silent cathedral. And as we return from this dance of energy, let the next presence arrive not as a thought, but as a gentle warmth behind your knees, subtle, unexpected, and deeply relaxing. Science is often seen as cold, all data, no soul. But in the varieties of scientific experience, Carl Sagan reveals its deepest truth. Science is the most romantic way of knowing the universe. Because it's honest. It doesn't pretend to have all the answers. It admits ignorance. It changes its mind. It follows evidence, not dogma. And that honesty, that willingness to say I don't know, is a kind of love. Love for reality, as it is, not as we wish it to be. Sagan speaks of wonder not as distraction, but as duty. To look up. To question. To feel small and still matter. He reflects on religion, not to attack, but to understand. The human need for meaning, for connection, for awe. And he says, science doesn't destroy that. It fulfills it, with facts that are more astonishing than myths. So if you've ever felt torn between logic and emotion, this book says, they can coexist. You can be clear-eyed, and still fall in love with the stars. One of the most peaceful moments comes when he describes the pale blue dot. Earth, seen from billions of miles away, a tiny speck in the vast dark. And instead of making us feel insignificant, it makes us feel precious. All of human history, every war, every love, every dream. On that fragile dot. So if you've ever feared the universe is indifferent, this voice says, it doesn't have to care for you to be beautiful. And your life, short, fleeting, real, is part of that beauty. Let that blend of clarity and wonder settle into your heart. Like sunlight warming a stone long after the day has ended. And as we close this chapter of cosmic reflection, let the next voice rise not from thought, but from the quiet behind your ribs, soft, slow, and full of breath. There are places in the world where hope should not survive. And yet, in one of the darkest, it did. Man's Search for Meaning by Viktor Frankl was born in Auschwitz, not as a memoir of horror, but as a quiet testament to the human spirit's unbreakable core. Frankl didn't survive because he was the strongest or the luckiest. He survived because he had a why. A love waiting for him. A book he hadn't finished writing. A future not yet lived. And from this, he formed logotherapy. The belief that the primary human drive is not pleasure, not power, but meaning. Even in suffering, we have one freedom no one can take. The freedom to choose our attitude. To say, this is happening, and still, I will not hate. I will not break. So if you've ever carried pain in silence, this book says, your suffering is not meaningless. And your choice, to keep going, is sacred. Frankl doesn't offer cheap comfort. He doesn't say everything happens for a reason. He says, You can find meaning in the happening. Not in the pain itself, but in how you carry it. One of the most peaceful ideas is that meaning isn't grand. It can be found in a memory. In a single act of kindness. In the way sunlight fell on the barracks one morning. You don't need to change the world to live meaningfully. You just need to stay open, to love, to hope, to the next breath. So if you've ever felt broken beyond repair, this voice says, you are not defined by what was taken. You are defined by what you still choose. Let that quiet strength settle into your chest. Like a flame sheltered from the wind by cupped hands. And as we leave this space of profound resilience, let the next presence arrive not as a story, but as a softening across your shoulders, like the first release after holding them tense for too long. Imagine standing at the peak of your life. A brilliant career. A deep love. A child on the way. And then, a diagnosis, terminal cancer. That was Paul Kalanithi's reality, and in When Breath Becomes Air. He doesn't rage. He reflects. This isn't a book about dying. It's about living, all the way to the end. He asks the quietest, deepest question. What makes life worth living when you know it's ending? And he finds the answer not in legacy, but in presence. In holding his daughter. In loving his wife. In writing these words, not for fame, but for clarity. Kalanithi was a neurosurgeon who spent his life peering into brains, searching for the seat of consciousness. In the end, he didn't find it in tissue, he found it in moments. In silence. In touch. In the way grief and joy can coexist. So if you've ever feared loss, or questioned your time, this book whispers, life isn't measured in years. It's measured in presence. In the way you show up, even when you're afraid. He doesn't pretend to have peace. He earns it, through honesty, through love, through writing until his hands could no longer hold the pen. One of the most tender lines. I can't know what lies ahead, but I do know this, I am a father now. Not I was. Not I will be. I am. That present tense, it's everything. So if you've ever felt like you don't have enough time, this voice says, you have this moment. And that's enough. Let that truth of presence settle into your bones. Like warmth spreading through cold hands near a fire. And as we step away from this intimate journey, let the next voice arrive not as a thought, but as a slight heaviness behind your eyelids, soft, natural, and ready for rest. Hidden in a secret annex, surrounded by fear, war, and silence. A young girl wrote in her diary. In spite of everything, I still believe people are really good at heart. Those words, firm and frank, aren't naive. They're revolutionary. Her diary isn't a record of suffering. It's a celebration of life. Crushes, family squabbles, dreams of being a writer. The way sunlight falls on the canal outside. She didn't write for history. She wrote to feel real. To say, I exist. I matter. I am not just a number. And in doing so, she created something eternal. Not because she died tragically, but because she lived, fully, honestly, beautifully. Even in the dark. So if you've ever doubted kindness, or felt the world is too broken, this voice says, hope is not denial. It's courage. It's the choice to see light, not because it's bright, but because you decide to look. And wasn't blind to cruelty. She knew fear. She felt loneliness. But she refused to let it define her. One of the most peaceful ideas in her writing is that growth doesn't stop, even in hiding. She questioned herself. She changed her mind. She fell in love with the idea of love. And in that inner movement, she was free. So if you've ever felt trapped, by circumstance, by fear, by time, this book says, your inner world is vast. No one can lock that away. Let that quiet courage settle into your heart. Like a single candle glowing in a dark room, unnoticed but unwavering. And as we close this tender chapter, let the next presence arrive not as a voice, but as a gentle warmth spreading through your fingertips, slow, quiet, and deeply human. Beneath everything we do, our ambitions, our beliefs, our need for significance, there's one deep fear. The fear of death. That's the quiet revelation at the heart of The Denial of Death by Ernest Becker. We build civilizations, create art, chase success. Not just to live, but to feel immortal. To leave a mark that says, I was here. But Becker doesn't judge this. He honors it. And then he offers a way forward. Face the fear. Not with despair, but with courage. Because when you stop denying death, you start living with authenticity. With love. With depth. So if you've ever felt haunted by time, or the idea of ending, this book says, that fear is human. And facing it, that's how you truly begin. He draws from psychology, mythology, and philosophy to show how cultures create immortality projects, religions, nations, legacies, to help us feel eternal. But the healthiest response isn't denial or grandeur. It's heroism of the ordinary. Living fully, loving deeply, creating beauty, not for fame, but for meaning. One of the most peaceful ideas is that true courage isn't fearlessness. It's acting with fear. Building a life, raising a child, writing a poem. Knowing it will end, and doing it anyway. So if you've ever felt small in the face of eternity, this book whispers, you are part of a heroic story. Not because you'll last forever, but because you choose to live, despite not lasting. Let that quiet bravery settle into your awareness. Like dusk settling over a long, honest day. And as we release this confrontation with mortality, let the next voice arrive not as a thought, but as a softening in the space between your eyebrows, like tension dissolving into stillness. We are the meaning-making species. That's the quiet truth at the heart of Sapiens by Yuval Noah Harari. We don't just survive. We tell stories. About gods. About nations. About love, money, justice. And these stories, these shared fictions, are what bind us together. Agriculture, empires, capitalism, none of it exists in nature. It exists because we agreed it does. And that's not fake. It's powerful. So if you've ever felt small in a vast universe, this book says, you belong to a species that turns chaos into meaning. And you're part of that story. Harari doesn't romanticize. He shows how these stories can enslave as much as liberate. But he also honors their beauty. The way a wedding isn't just biology, but a ritual. The way a dollar bill is just paper, but carries trust. And that ability, to believe in the invisible, is what makes us Homo sapiens. One of the most calming ideas is that meaning isn't found, it's created. Not by gods, not by nature, but by us. Around fires. In temples. On screens. So if you've ever felt lost, or unsure of your purpose, this book says, you don't need a grand mission. You just need to participate in the story. By loving, creating, caring, wondering. Let that sense of belonging to a shared human journey settle into your breath. Like a single note joining a distant choir. And as we step back from this sweeping view of humanity, let the next voice arrive not as a concept, but as a slight warmth behind your ears, quiet, unexpected, and deeply soothing. There are moments when time disappears. You're reading, painting, walking, even folding laundry. And suddenly, you're not thinking. You're not rushing. You're just in it. That's the quiet magic at the heart of Flow by Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi. Not a self-help trick, but a deep state of being where action and awareness merge. He calls it flow, a mental state where challenge and skill are perfectly balanced. Too easy, and you're bored. Too hard, and you're anxious. But just right? You forget yourself. You become the moment. And in that forgetting, joy appears, not as excitement, but as a deep, wordless satisfaction. So if your mind feels scattered, or life feels like a series of tasks, this book says, look for the rhythm. The way your hands move when you cook. The way your breath matches your steps when you walk. These are not distractions from meaning. They are meaning. Csikszentmihalyi studied artists, athletes, monks, even factory workers, and found that flow isn't limited to the gifted. It's available to anyone who pays attention, who finds a challenge just beyond their reach, and leans into it with care. One of the most peaceful ideas is that happiness isn't found in leisure. It's found in engagement. Not in doing nothing, but in doing something well. With your full presence. So if you've ever felt empty after scrolling, or restless despite having free time, this book whispers, joy isn't passive. It's built, moment by moment, in the act of showing up. And the best part? Flow doesn't require grand achievements. It can happen while gardening, listening to music, or writing a letter. All it asks is that you care, just a little, about what you're doing. Let that sense of quiet absorption settle into your body. Like a single thread being woven into a larger tapestry. And as we drift from this rhythm of being, let the next voice arrive not as a thought, but as a gentle warmth spreading through your lower back, soft, grounding, and deeply restful. In a world that often feels like it's breaking, what if we paused, not to ignore the pain, but to remember the progress? That's The Quiet Heart of Enlightenment now by Steven Pinker. Not blind optimism, but data-driven hope. He doesn't deny suffering. He doesn't minimize injustice. But he asks us to see the full picture. On average, across centuries, human life is getting better. We live longer. We suffer less from disease and violence. We're more connected, more educated, more free. And this isn't magic, it's the result of reason, science, and empathy. So if you've ever felt overwhelmed by the news, this book says, don't look away, but also, don't forget the light. Good is happening too. Pinker doesn't claim we've arrived. He says we're moving. And movement, even slow, uneven movement, is a kind of victory. One of the most calming ideas is that progress isn't inevitable. But it's possible. Because we've already made it. From foot travel to flight. From candlelight to code. From silence to song. And that means we can keep going. Not by force, but by choice. By choosing curiosity over fear. Cooperation over conflict. So if you've ever doubted that your small actions matter, this book reminds you. Every act of kindness, every honest conversation, every moment of courage. It adds to the net. Let that quiet faith in humanity settle into your chest. Like sunlight slowly warming a stone after a long winter. And as we step back from this vision of quiet progress, let the next presence arrive not as a thought, but as a slight softening beneath your jaw, like the first release of clenched teeth in hours. We carry a quiet myth. That humans are naturally violent, that peace is fragile, and war is inevitable. But in the better angels of our nature, Steven Pinker offers a radical truth. Violence has been declining for centuries. Not perfectly. Not for everyone. But on a broad, historical scale. We're living in the most peaceful time in human history. He doesn't say this to erase trauma or excuse injustice. He says it to honor what we've learned. That empathy grows. That reason spreads. That cooperation wins, slowly, unevenly, but steadily. So if you've ever feared that humanity is beyond saving, this book says, we're learning. We're choosing compassion more often than not. Pinker traces the rise of empathy, the spread of literacy, the decline of cruelty. From public executions to the growing taboo around war. And he shows how institutions, ideas, and even storytelling have helped us see others as human. One of the most peaceful ideas is that peace isn't the absence of conflict. It's the presence of restraint. The choice not to retaliate. The decision to listen. The courage to forgive. So if you've ever felt divided from someone you love, this book whispers, you don't have to agree to care. Morality isn't one path, it's many. And we can walk them side by side. Let that quiet hope in human goodness settle into your breath. Like a single leaf floating down a still river. And as we leave this vision of quiet evolution, let the next voice arrive not as a word, but as a gentle heaviness in your arms, like the first sign of deep relaxation before sleep. Why do good people disagree so deeply? Not because one side is evil, but because we feel morality differently. That's the gentle revelation at the heart of The Righteous Mind by Jonathan Haidt. He compares the mind to a rider on an elephant. Reason is the rider. Emotion is the elephant. And most of the time, the rider follows the elephant's lead. And our moral intuitions, loyalty, care, fairness, authority, sanctity, are not universal. They vary. Some value fairness above all. Others prioritize loyalty or tradition. And that's not wrong. It's human. So if you've ever felt torn in a political or personal disagreement, this book says, you don't have to change your values, just understand theirs. Empathy isn't agreement. It's respect. Haidt doesn't take sides. He builds bridges. And in doing so, he offers a quiet peace. You can disagree, and still love. One of the most calming ideas is that morality evolved not to find truth, but to hold groups together. So when someone defends their beliefs fiercely, it's not always about logic, it's about belonging. So if you've ever felt alienated from family, friends, or society, this book says, you don't have to fix anyone. You just have to remember. We're all trying to make sense of the world in ways that feel true. Let that sense of spacious understanding grow in your heart. Like a room where everyone can rest, even if they don't speak the same language. And as we step away from this reflection on human difference, let the next presence arrive not as a thought, but as a softening across your forehead, like a hand gently smoothing out worry. The world is changing fast. Technology, climate, identity, everything feels uncertain. And in 21 Lessons for the 21st Century, Yuval Noah Harari doesn't offer solutions. He offers something better. Clarity. He says the most important skill in modern life isn't coding or networking. It's inner peace. The ability to sit with uncertainty, without panic. To be here, not lost in the past, not anxious about the future, but present. So if you've ever felt overwhelmed by the pace of life, this book says, you don't need answers. You just need to be here. Harari doesn't promise happiness. He warns of distraction, how algorithms pull us into outrage, comparison, and endless scrolling. But he also offers a way out. Mindfulness. Stillness. The courage to disconnect. One of the most peaceful ideas is that you don't have to keep up. You don't have to know everything. You don't have to be productive every moment. Your value isn't in your output, it's in your awareness. So if you've ever felt like you're falling behind, this voice says, you're not behind. You're exactly where you need to be. Breathing. Listening. Being. Let that permission to rest settle into your bones. Like a long exhale after holding your breath through a storm. And as we close this chapter of modern wisdom, let the next voice arrive not as a lesson, but as a quiet warmth spreading through your feet, like you've finally taken off your shoes after a long journey. There's a kind of peace that doesn't come from silence, but from attention. From the way your hands feel a wrench, your eyes follow a spark, your mind syncs with a machine. That's the quiet heart of Zen and the Art of Motorcycle Maintenance by Robert M. Pirsig. Not a guide to repair, but a meditation on care. He doesn't speak of enlightenment as sitting cross-legged on a mountain. He speaks of it as tightening a bolt with full presence. Cleaning a carburetor not because it's urgent, but because it matters. Pirsig calls this quality that moment when the doer, the tool, and the task become one. Not thinking. Not rushing. Just being there. So if your mind feels scattered, or life feels mechanical, this book says, you can be present in the ordinary. In the hum of an engine. In the rhythm of work done with love. He also explores the divide between logic and intuition. The classical and the romantic ways of seeing. And he doesn't choose one. He seeks harmony. Because the world isn't just gears, it's also beauty. And you don't have to pick between them. One of the most peaceful ideas is that peace isn't found in escape. It's found in engagement. Not in doing nothing, but in doing one thing with your whole self. So if you've ever felt disconnected from your body, your work, your life, this voice says, come back. Touch the metal. Feel the oil. Listen to the engine. That's where you are real. Let that sense of wholeness settle in. Like wheels rolling softly on an open road under a pale moon. And as we leave this rhythm of mindful motion, let the next presence arrive not as a thought, but as a gentle warmth spreading through your elbows, subtle, unexpected, and deeply calming. What if plants aren't just passive? What if they've shaped us, through sweetness, beauty, intoxication, control? That's the quiet reversal at the heart of The Botany of Desire by Michael Pollan. A book that flips the script. We don't cultivate plants. We dance with them. The apple tempts us with sweetness, so we spread its seeds. The tulip dazzles with beauty, so we plant it across continents. The potato feeds us, so we reshape the earth to grow it. And in return, they evolve to fulfill our desires. Not by choice, by survival. So if you've ever felt separate from nature, this book says, you're already in relationship with it. You've been dancing with plants your whole life. Pollan doesn't speak coldly. He speaks of dirt under fingernails, of sunlight on leaves, of the quiet joy of gardening. And in that, he reminds us, we are not above nature. We are part of its web of mutual need. One of the most calming ideas is that domestication isn't domination. It's coevolution. A partnership. We give them care. They give us life. So if you've ever felt lost in the artificial world of screens and schedules, this book whispers, return to the soil. Touch a leaf. Smell the earth. Watch something grow. That's where you remember your roots. Let that connection to the living world deepen. Like roots drinking deep in the quiet dark. And as we rise from this garden of mutual longing, let the next voice arrive not as a word, but as a softening in the palms of your hands, like they're remembering the feel of soil after a long time indoors. You don't have to do anything to be worthy of peace. You just have to be here. That's the quiet truth at the heart of The Art of Living by Thich Nhat Hanh. A book that doesn't teach enlightenment, but attention. To your breath. To your steps. To the cup of tea in your hands. He says, wash the dishes to wash the dishes. Not to finish them. Not to move on. Just to feel the water, the warmth, the moment. And in that attention, peace appears. Not as a grand revelation, but as a whisper. You are here. And that is enough. So if your mind is always rushing ahead, this book says, come back. There's nothing more important than this breath. Thich Nhat Hanh doesn't demand perfection. He offers gentleness. He reminds us that even anger can be held with care. Not suppressed, not acted on, but acknowledged, like a child needing comfort. One of the most peaceful ideas is that peace isn't the absence of noise. It's the presence of awareness. You can be in a crowded room and still be calm. Because peace lives in the way you breathe, not in the silence around you. So if you've ever felt like you need to escape to find stillness, this voice says, you don't have to leave. Just pause. Breathe. Feel your feet on the floor. That's where peace lives. Let that slowness sink in. Like a leaf settling on still water, making no ripple. And as we release this practice of presence, let the next voice arrive not as a lesson, but as a slight warmth behind your knees, like sunlight touching skin after being indoors too long. Harmony doesn't come from grand gestures. It comes from small, repeated acts of care. That's the quiet wisdom at the heart of the Analects by Confucius. Not rules, not commandments, but gentle guidance on how to live well with others. He speaks of Ren, humaneness. Of Li, ritual, not as formality, but as respect. Bowing not because you must, but because you honor the other. And he says, the superior person is calm and at ease. Not loud. Not urgent. Just present. So if the world feels chaotic, or relationships feel strained, this book says, begin with yourself. Speak gently. Listen fully. Be the calm in the room. Confucius doesn't demand perfection. He honors progress. He values patience, humility, and the quiet dignity of showing up. One of the most peaceful ideas is that virtue isn't performative. It's habitual. Like a muscle, it grows with use. Every kind word, every act of patience, every moment of self-awareness. It strengthens the soul. So if you've ever felt like you're not good enough, this voice says, you don't have to be perfect. Just keep choosing well. The rest will follow. Let that quiet confidence in goodness settle into your chest. Like light filling a room slowly, without hurry. And as we step away from this ancient wisdom, let the next presence arrive not as a teaching, but as a softening across your shoulders, like a coat gently lifted from your back after a long day. What does a just soul look like? Not one that conquers, but one that is in harmony. That's the quiet vision at the heart of the Republic by Plato. Where justice isn't law, but balance. Like a well-tuned lyre. Where reason, courage, and desire play in rhythm. Not one dominating the others, but all in alignment. So if you've ever felt torn between what you know and what you want, this idea says, you don't have to win the war. You just have to find balance. Plato doesn't demand perfection. He invites alignment. And he suggests that true peace comes not from power, but from inner order. One of the most calming ideas is that the soul, like the city, thrives on harmony. When reason guides, courage supports, and desire is not suppressed but channeled. That's where freedom lives. So if you've ever felt fragmented, or pulled in too many directions, this book whispers, you don't have to be one thing. You just have to be in tune. Let that sense of inner harmony deepen. Like music fading into silence, leaving only resonance. And as we release this vision of balance, let the next presence arrive not as a philosophy, but as a gentle warmth spreading through your lower belly, soft, grounding, and deeply restful. Happiness isn't pleasure. It isn't success. It's flourishing. That's the quiet heart of Nicomachean Ethics by Aristotle. A life well lived, not in grand acts, but in small, repeated choices. To be kind. To be honest. To grow. He says virtue is like a muscle. Not born in you, but built by doing. You become just by acting justly. Courageous by acting bravely. So if you've ever felt like you're not good enough, this book says, you don't have to be perfect. Just keep choosing well. The rest will follow. Aristotle doesn't rush. He honors habit. He values balance, not too much, not too little, but the mean between extremes. One of the most peaceful ideas is that you don't need to change everything at once. You just need to move, gently, consistently, in the right direction. So if you've ever felt overwhelmed by self-improvement, this voice says, start where you are. Do one kind thing. Speak one honest word. That's enough. Let that patience with yourself deepen. Like sunlight warming stone over time, not all at once. And as we close this chapter of quiet growth, let the next presence arrive not as a goal, but as a softening in your jaw, like you've finally stopped clenching after holding tension for too long. We end with a book that feels like silence. The Tao Te Ching by Lao Tzu, 81 verses that don't explain, but point. Not to answers, but to the space between breaths. It speaks of wu wei, effortless action. Of water that flows without force. Of trees that grow without rushing. One line stays with you. Do nothing, and nothing is left undone. Not laziness. Not apathy. But trust. Trust in the natural order. In the way things unfold when you stop pushing. So if you've ever felt like you have to fix everything, this book whispers, let go. The universe is already moving. You don't have to carry it. Lao Tzu doesn't demand enlightenment. He invites surrender. To stop striving. To stop naming. To just be with what is. One of the most peaceful ideas is that the greatest strength is softness. Water wears down stone not by force, but by persistence. And you? You don't have to be hard to be strong. So if you've ever felt like you're not doing enough, this voice says, rest is part of the way. Stillness is not failure. It's return. Let that release wash over you. Like a wave returning to the sea, leaving no trace. And now, there's no need for another word. We've walked through 37 books. 37 voices from across time and space. All saying, in their own way, you are not broken. You are becoming. You don't need to remember their titles. You don't need to understand every word. Just knowing they exist. That wisdom is out there, soft and patient, is enough. Now, let your breath slow. Let your body sink deeper into stillness. And let the last idea of this journey be the simplest. You are safe. You are allowed to rest. And the world will still turn. Even if you close your eyes. So close them now. Feel the weight of your body. The rise and fall of your chest. The quiet hum of the room around you. And if a thought comes, let it pass like a cloud. If a memory rises, let it drift like a leaf on water. You don't have to hold anything. You don't have to be anyone. Just be here. And when sleep comes, not with effort, but with surrender, know that you are not losing awareness. You are returning to it. Good night.